Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucks in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
And bellying up to the 9-foot homemade oak bar. My name is Craig Toth, and his name is not Chris, but it starts with a C. I'm bringing in for the first time from the Bucco Fever Pod, at Bucco Fever Pod, Charlie Franson. Follow him at C Franson IV, and I found out that he is a fourth. That IV is not for what he's tapping himself with as the Pirates go into a losing streak. He's not tapping the bag or anything. Charlie, how you doing today, brother?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk some Buccos.
Yeah, and we already started talking before you jumped on here. That's pretty much what I feel like all Pirates fans do when they see another Pirates fan that they know is as passionate as they are about the game. That it's just like, hey, man, did you see these moves they made? And just talking through some different things and kind of what could happen. But the big news from this past weekend, we're going to start with Paul Skenes. I will eat crow again. I did not see this call up coming. Had a source. Basically told me the day before it's not happening. Texted me that morning it might be happening. And then by the afternoon, after Paul Skenes had thrown his bullpen, he's like, yeah, Craig, it's definitely happening. But we got to see Paul Skenes. Definitely very cool. I was there with my kiddos. I'm assuming that you were in front of the television if you weren't there, Charlie.
So I missed the first two innings because my son had a baseball game, so I had to go to that. But I had the ticker up, watching everything, as he was playing. He's only in like T-ball, so it's not super exciting, but yeah, I made it back. He's as advertised, I think. He knows how to pitch, and I like it because I think he's going to put some people in the seats. I think he's that good. Like, he's just going to bring people in just with what he does, which is great.
Yeah, it was really cool. The atmosphere was, anytime he got to two strikes, the crowd was up cheering like it was, the bottom of the ninth. And he definitely, I don't think the moment was too big for him. The one thing that I had talked about with Jack McMullen right before he was called up from the Indianapolis Indians was the one thing I was concerned about was his pitch usage. And it wasn't that he wasn't going to be able to go that far. It was that he kind of finds himself getting deep into counts. And that's like the one thing I noticed from him again.
Yeah.
And not like super efficient, but he's also kind of trying out, like 3 new pitches that he hadn't used a ton before this year. You had the fastball slider with a little bit of a changeup at LSU. He comes in here, and I know one of his last outings, I think they basically said, because everybody was worried that his fastball was down a little bit and he was throwing a lot of the off-speed stuff. They just kind of needed to see it. But I just wanted to kind of caution people to that just a little bit because, of course, everybody's like, we only went 4 innings. He threw 74 pitches through those 4 innings and then another 10 on top of that, with a couple base runners in the 5th. And that, for a Pirate struggling bullpen, is something that he's going to have to learn. that, you can't blow it past everybody, and maybe you can use that splinker a little bit, some of the off-speed pitches to get some soft contact. But that's just kind of like the stuff that I've been observing. I don't, some people have gone off the deep end. I've seen on social media that, 6.75 ERA, and a couple people were joking with me because they know that I love the whip, and it was like a 2.00, whip. What do you feel about that? So, I mean, is any of that stuff worrying you at all, Charlie?
No, I mean, it's his first start in the big leagues. Like you said, he's trying out some different stuff. Kind of equate it to like Mitch Keller when he first came up. He looked good, but he was only going like 4.5 innings or, 4 1/3 or whatever. He wasn't getting deep into the counts or deep into the game, but I'm not real worried about it. I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, and that's where it's just, I mean, I believe that the stuff will play. I believe that he's shown that he's, in his time at Air Force and his time at LSU, that, like I said, the moment's not too big for him. He works hard. I mean, people have talked about the fact that he doesn't sit in the dugout. He's, kind of like looking at pitches even after the game. I mean, they pretty much probably had to call him back out because he's, I'm guessing that in some ways he wasn't happy with himself because he maybe wanted to go longer into the game.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of the person that he is.
Yeah, and I'll take that. Every day, somebody that's that focused on the job. Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, and as we're speaking right now, Quinn Priester is on the mound. Derek Shelton had mentioned to everyone, that 6-man rotation. But before we hopped on here, with the moves that came out, just prior to us recording, Ryder Ryan back up, an impending DFA for Fleming, and then Jason Mackey tweets out that Carmen Majinski's coming up. It kind of seems like this is the end of that 6-man rotation.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was a cool kind of experiment or idea, but with the way the bullpen's been, you've got to have more arms out there, especially like what we just said about Skenes not necessarily going deep yet. They need more fresh arms out there in the pen.
Yeah, and you have like Jared Jones because you don't know if they're gonna ramp him back down, ramp him back up. If Bailey Falter unfortunately has a blow up inning or something, I mean, you're asking a lot from a pen that, I mean, there's only a few guys in there right now that we were kind of counting on at the beginning of the season, and not many that have shown to be what they were on paper before the season started.
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the biggest disappointments, I think. But, I mean, when you lose all the guys that they did coming into the season and early in the season, so losing Morita for the year, Baruki being out for who knows how long, you lost a lot. And even Majinski, not being ready to go. So, you lose that. Luis Ortiz, I wouldn't have ever dreamed he would be as good as what he is and has been in the pen, but that's been a nice little boost. But it hasn't been the big strength that I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and for Luis Ortiz, I mean, the one thing that I'm looking at here is, I mean, hasn't pitched that much in May, and I know that's been brought up by some people, but overall, 21 and 2/3 innings pitched, a 2.91 ERA, the 1.062 WHIP, has walked a little bit of guys, 11 walks, 15 Ks. But the one thing I did see on there, which always sticks out to me after the WHIP, is hasn't given up any home runs, which I'm probably jinxing him at this point in time, but has learned to kind of keep the ball on. If you're not going to strike the guys out, then, kind of keep the ball on the ground and, you can get out of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that's been huge for him. I mean, he's always kind of struggled a little bit with his command, and, he's walked quite a few people, in the past. So I'm not surprised by that number, but he has it. Like you said, the no homers is huge for him.
So my question kind of to you would be, is this going to be like a a rotating bullpen for the foreseeable future. I mean, I know they do have some guys, with some options, getting rid of Rowanzi, who didn't have any, now Fleming, who doesn't have any, and just kind of maybe going with the hot hand at times, and then just, you're up here for a little bit, you're option back down, and we're just going to, bring the next guy up.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the open roster spot created by Fleming. We were talking before we hopped on. I think, it's got to be Eric Lauer, and I saw other people on Twitter, say the same thing. But he gives you that left-handed, multiple innings guy that Fleming was supposed to be, and gives you somebody to kind of balance with Ortiz when your starters, aren't, because they're so young. A lot of them, they're not pitching that deep.
And we talked about that like beforehand, is Lauer doesn't have any of those options, and then you have I mentioned Plasmeyer, who does. So it's kind of like, okay, like you said, I believe when we were talking, is it's okay, bring Lauer up, and if he does the same thing as Fleming, then you can kind of just, he can go the same type of route, and then you have those options. And that's kind of why this depth is so important. That just the crushing factor of this is that, I mean, I know that Bednar did have that 1-2-3 inning last night. He's done that within his last like 4 or 5 times, but in between there, things get a little bit dicey. You need that person to steady out the pen. I know people were calling for Holderman, and if people are just looking at the stats, they'll look and say, okay, his ERA is really good, but it's like, he was also a part of those terrible things of like walkings. Mm-hmm. Like he had 2 walks. Those 3 walks and 1 strike. Yeah, 3 walks and 1 strikeout. So it's not even like Holderman has been, that lockdown guy that you're looking for either.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how this pen develops. And another guy to keep an eye on once he gets to Indy is Dalton Jeffries. Who they, just picked up. So I don't know if they can, turn him into anything or not, but, that's another arm that you could, mix in there. If, Lauer comes up, is terrible. Plasmeyer comes up, he's terrible. You have like Dalton Jeffries that can come right in, just a revolving door, essentially. Hopefully you don't get to that point, but, it's there.
Yeah, it's definitely like, it's like breaking a case of emergency or whatever it may be. But I mean, that's the other thing is, I mean, I did look at Jeffries a little bit. I feel like that they have certain people that they see, like pitch mixes that they have, types of shapes that they have with their pitches, and see that they can maybe, do some good stuff with that. I mean, when Ryan Barucki was picked up off of waivers, you wouldn't think that you could have even turned him in to what he was last year. I mean, unfortunately with the injury this year, but it's like, can we, get some innings that way? Another person I feel like that people are going to be calling for, because Braxton Ashcraft just had his best outing of the year. He went 7 innings, 10 strikeouts. I saw him on the home opener in Altoona, and I mean, he was going up against like Dylan Cruz and a few other people, but I like to see that he's working through this kind of stuff, the early stuff going on. But he's a guy that's also kind of, stretched out a little bit, but is not, he may also be on a little bit of an innings cap as well. So he's a guy that could fill in a relief role that's kind of on the 40 man. People were thinking it may be, Jose Hernandez for the other lefty, but I do like the mention of the Lauer just because of the length that he could provide. And I mean, it's basically thinking, I mean, everybody knows what's happening at this point in time. It's 3-0 Milwaukee. Quinn Priester's given up a home run. But like I said, I think we already decided that even if Quinn went out there and shoved, that it's a possibility that he would just be a casualty of like the 26/40 man crunch.
Yeah, I mean, he would have had to have pitched an absolute gem today, I think, to to kind of keep that going. But I mean, who are you going to send down? Skenes or Quinn Priester? You're going to send Quinn Priester down. So, yeah, I mean, he's not having a great night tonight so far, but yeah, he's going to be back in Indy soon.
Yeah, and I even thought like even maybe like with Majinski coming up, it's we're going to see a little bit more of Hunter Stratton tonight, and then he goes to another person with some options. But I want to throw some stats out here for everybody, and I haven't even told Charlie about these beforehand. But we're talking about the bullpen woes a little bit. And the title of this one is, Pirates development can't stop at PNC. That, applies to, Skenes. He's absolutely not a finished product. Only pitched, less than 30 innings or a total of like 30 innings in the minors. Last year, I don't really even count. I think 27 innings this year. I mean, nobody's going to say that. But as far as like the bullpen goes, one of the stats that I look at a lot of times for the bullpen is the left on base percentage, because you're looking for those guys that can come in because everybody will say, well, Luis Ortiz works better with a clean inning. Colin Holderman works better with a clean inning. And I think that's kind of maybe where Moretta and his little bit of attitude and not really caring about that type of situation kind of goes, is that the Pirates left on base percentage is 28th in Major League Baseball right now at 66.2%. So basically, you're looking at that, and like almost 34% of the people who are on base when the reliever comes in are scoring. I mean, that is something that is kind of killing even when the offense can get it together. Then it's like, okay, we have a 3-2 lead. And back in the day, it would be like, okay, here's your, even if it's a 6, 7, 8, 9, we have those guys. But right now, I mean, that's been a glaring hole.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like they just, I don't know. They're just like missing a spark. And I know that's like, hard to define per se, but I think Morita was a good example. He just had fire. Like every time he came in, he was fired up and ready to roll. But they just don't. They don't have that right now. They just have. I've been super impressed with what Hunter Stratton has done. I would have never guessed that he would have even made the team going into spring training. But when Hunter Stratton is one of your more dependable arms in the pen, you're kind of in trouble. That tells you a lot about their pen.
What are you talking about, Charlie? I mean, Hunter Stratton, it was just like a shutdown guy. And he's kind of like had to fill that role, and he's, failed at times, and, he's been successful at times, but he's not a guy that maybe can provide that. And I mean, I just kind of feel bad for Kyle Nicholas.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that I will point out, because a lot of people said that, he has struggled with walks in the minor leagues, and he has. But a lot of that, if you look at it, was when he was in his starter role. Once he switched to the relief role last year, a lot of the stuff for him kind of, I wouldn't say went away, because his ERA looks good. He had a 1.65 ERA as a reliever in the minors, and that's counting last year into this year. The 0.95 whip, so you like to see that. Over 12 Ks per 9. He did have right around like 5 walks, so that's where that kind of stuff comes in. It is a 4.10 FIP. So, I mean, there is some like underlying stuff that he may not have been able to keep this up. But for him, I mean, I kind of have to – I wouldn't say I'll defend Shelton on this, and I won't defend Kyle Nicholas on this, but because you have to throw strikes in the major leagues.
Yeah.
But the one thing when people are telling this narrative that a lot of people leave out is that Kyle Nicholas came in and blew the first 2 batters away.
Yeah.
Like he struck out the first 2 batters. So it's like, well, you don't have anybody up in the pen. And it's like, well, if the guy has, maybe we can get him to go into the next inning, maybe pitch to the first batter, depending on who's coming up in the order. The other piece of that may be, we have a whole entire half inning. There were guys, I think that the term for me is I use loosening in the pen. when they're not throwing. When they're throwing in the
Yeah.
pen, I call throwing in the pen. But there's guys back there, they're doing the stuff with, like, you know, they're stretching out, they're throwing the balls. So, I mean, there are guys getting ready. But, I mean, this isn't like we were talking about, like your son with T-ball. This isn't Little League with my son, where if a pitcher's pitching pretty bad, you just call the shortstop and he throws like, you know, 9 warm-up pitchers and the ump goes, okay, let's go. But so it is a little bit of a stretch to get people going. But I mean, this kind of happened a couple times where it's like stuff gets away from you before you realize that it does. And then also when you are shortening your pen and you don't have as many guys, you kind of, it's like, I think it was, I wish Stephen Brault would talk about, you know, the one outing he had, and I believe it was in Colorado one time, where he came out and he gave up like 5 or 6 runs in the first inning.
Yeah.
And he went like 6 innings and threw like 110 pitches, because it's sometimes, unfortunately, I know you want to win the games that are in front of you, but sometimes your guy has to wear one. You know what I mean? Like it has to happen.
Yeah, you have to save the pen. Like if you have, you know, you're the game 1 of the series and you're, you know, out of it by the 3rd inning, you just keep going with what you got, whether it's working or not, just so you don't ruin the pen for the rest of the series. And I think that was kind of where Nicholas was. Like you said, I'm not gonna defend Shelton, but I think leaving him out there was kind of what you had to do. And then I thought it was good that he came in the next day and, you know, looked fine, you know, for the most part. So.
Yeah, and like the other part is, I mean, we're mentioning like, you know, with like leaving Fleming out there. Well, he didn't know that, you know, Jared Triolo, who's a Gold Glover, was gonna, you know, whiff on a ball, and then Ono Cruz was gonna stumble around with a double play ball that, you know, kind of would have, you know, ended the inning. It's not saying that the guys were pitching super great either, but I mean, I look at everything, like the entire body of work. It's not just like, well, he left him out there and he didn't have anybody up. Well, it's like, okay, well, you struck out 2 guys, you know, hit a guy with a pitch, and then you threw like 12, 14 straight balls. Like who, like at that point in time, you're like 8 balls in and you're like, crap, get this guy like stretching out. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like everybody, it sometimes feels like this is like MLB The Show, and it's just like you can like bring your reliever in
immediately,
like warming him up whatsoever. And I mean, and sometimes it's just like you are working with the guys that are given to you.
Yeah, and it's so much different now with like the pitch clock and the pace of the game and all that. You can't milk it like you maybe would have been able to. You could have slowed it down and had the guy step off and do whatever so that he only has to pitch to one more batter until your pen's ready. That's not the case anymore. You have to keep moving. So sometimes you're going to have to face multiple guys before anybody's ready to come, you know, relieve you.
Charlie, that's a great point, and I'm gonna tell people that you didn't say that, and I'm gonna use that myself. And I was joking, because that is like just a really good point. Because before, you could just walk around, stretch yourself out a little bit, throw a pitch every like 40 seconds, you know, and give your time. But it's just like, okay, I got to get my head back in here, and I kind of got to throw this, and the game goes so quickly. So that's like stuff that's definitely going to have to be adjusted with. Are you a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates and supporting small businesses? If so, Bucks in the Basement has you covered. Introducing the Bucks in the Basement Vouch Store, with products from places like Split Rock Coffee. Coffee with a purpose. Established, owned, and operated by disabled veterans, sworn to protect America. Or Camp Craft Cocktails, More than cocktails, it's a mission to build longer tables where everyone is welcome. We try and vouch for these products. Bucks in the Basement, proudly brought to you by Vouch. Visit our Vouch store at bucksinthebasement.com or simply click on the link in the show notes. Talking about making adjustments, there definitely needs to be some adjustments to this lineup. And it's not, I mean, there is like the elephant in the room that, big giant bullseye that everybody could hit. And we will talk, definitely about that one. But I would kind of say to you, other than that, the big giant elephant in the room, who are some guys that are maybe like underperforming, or I put down as, the weak links? I always think of that goofy lady in my head. You are the weakest link. Goodbye,
Yeah.
type of thing. I mean, I'm maybe dating myself a little bit with that, but other than that one, like, who do you think it, like, in your mind, has been kind of the underperformers this year so far?
I mean, you could make an argument for everyone except Connor Joe. He's been the only one that's been anything close to consistent. I think we're seeing some good stuff out of some of them. Reynolds 5 for 5 last night. Cruz has been dialing in, and even Kutch has been hitting the ball pretty hard. But I think, like, other than the big glaring weakness, it's Jack Sawinski, just that Jack Sawinski hasn't done much of anything. And just when he looks like he's coming around, and then he just goes right back to just striking out constantly. And I would say Jared Triolo as well. I like Jared Triolo a lot. I think, a glove guy, he's arguably second best on the team, next to Hayes, but, rolling him out there every day just hasn't really worked out.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, I'm looking right now, and you mentioned Jack Sawinski and you mentioned Jared Triolo, and their stat lines are extremely similar.
Yeah.
Right now, Jack Sawinski, he's got the K rate down. He's below 23% on the K rate. Walk rate's about an 11. Jared Triolo is striking out 24% of the time. Walk rate just above an 11. WRC plus a 59 for Jack Sawinski, 58 for Jared Triolo. And that's kind of like, you don't want Jack Sawinski to hit like Jared Triolo, and that is no offense to Jared Triolo whatsoever.
Right.
But I mean, Jared Triolo is doing what, I mean, I think everybody kind of had envisioned for him before the season started. Unfortunately, it's taken an injury to Brian Hayes for that to happen. But basically, I mean, he's kind of become that super utility. You're not going to expect much from the bat, but the defense is going to give you what would equate to, by the end of the season, probably an everyday starter around 2 to 3 WAR, and just, all defense, and any offense you can get from him is going to be a bonus. But with Jack Sawinski, I mean, man, you need the power. You need the fear. I mean, I know that he did hit a home run recently, but I mean, when he's at only 3 home runs and you have guys that are playing for less time are, almost the same as him. I mean, you have Joey Bart, has very minimal plate appearances. The Yasmanian Devil, I always got to mention that because that's Chris's favorite player, actually the least favorite player probably. But, has a couple home runs and has always shown some power. But with Jack, I mean, I just don't know, he has to do something. I don't think that AAA is the answer. That has been done previously. But, I mean, it has to be maybe sitting for like a week and getting back into the cage and getting your swing back or something, because, I mean, it just can't go on like much longer for him like this.
Yeah, no, and then that's Yeah, that's the problem. Like, what do you do with them? Like, I don't know if like you said, I don't know if AAA is good. If you sit them on the bench, it's not like there's somebody, an offensive powerhouse that can step in and play for them. So, like, I mean, what do you do? You just he's a tough situation because the power's there. Like, the homers are there, but man, he's just not showing it.
Yeah, I mean, you see a guy that puts up 20 plus home runs. And I mean, I know before the year, a lot of people talked about the fact that, we have what should be possibly like four, 20 plus home run guys easy. Like the first time the Pirates are going to do that in their lineup, like ever. But when you have that happening, I mean, obviously, Ono Cruz coming on, Jared Triolo, the BABIP is coming back down. I will say that he's actually having some bad luck. He's below 300. He's sitting around like, I think it was like 235 to 255. It kind of swings in between there. But even with that, the average is not going to come up very much. And I mean, I'll still always mention this one to me is it's Michael A. Taylor. And I know it's basically like we have Jared Triolo, defensive specialist. We have Alika Williams, defensive specialist. We have, Michael A. Taylor, defensive specialist. And that's just way too many defensive specialists to have in a lineup together. I mean, his numbers, just for everybody, striking out 35.5% of the time, walking 6.4% of the time. And if anybody's surprised, look at his numbers throughout his career. I mean, this is pretty much where he lines up. He did get the home run, but does have the 62 WRC plus. And so that's where, like, in my mind, at some point in time, I believe that if your decision is to keep playing Jack, you play Jack in center, you play Olivares in right field, because Olivares at least gives you some power potential from there. I mean, I don't see that with Michael A. Taylor whatsoever. I mean, everybody's throwing the biggest thing is to look on Baseball Savant and say, if a player played in this, ballpark, what would they have for home runs and different stuff like that? Well, I mean, Michael A. Taylor had a bunch of home runs last year, and he was playing in Minnesota. And if he played in PNC, you could pretty much cut that in half. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing for – I mean, people threw out with like Andrew McCutchen has 4 home runs, but he would have 9 to 11 in Milwaukee. But I would also throw out that if he played for the Chicago Cubs, he would have 3. So, I mean, those things kind of like, play off of themselves a little bit. But I could kind of see that power potential, especially with the cavernous left field that the Pirates have for Michael A. Taylor, that power wasn't really going to be there. And I mean, yes, he does make up for that defensively, but when your biggest issue is not being able to hit in the lineup, it's like, well, then how does that really help? And then you have 2 guys that you were supposed to make better defensively. And it almost feels like in some ways, Jack and Reynolds have taken a step back. I mean, Jack I posted last night a hit that had a 96% catch rate, and he gave on up so quickly. I mean, Reynolds, you're flip-flopping him back and forth from left field to right field. You're seeing him taking, some bad routes. I mean, I liked the signing when it happened. I cautioned people to a degree. I wasn't, because my biggest need, and Charlie, if you listen to the show, if you don't tell anybody, just tell them you're a big fan. And I said, I think our biggest need was at second base, because we didn't have a guaranteed second baseman, and we're rolling into it the same way we did last year, where we rolled in with Rodolfo Castro, who hit a little bit of a hot streak. You did it with Triolo this year, and then you have Nick Gonzalez and Peguero, and I know you have a lot of guys, but if you want to be competitive, you have to put a major league second baseman out there every day.
Yeah, I agree. Like during the off season, when the rumors were kind of circulating around that maybe they were looking at bringing in a second baseman, like somebody like an Adam Frazier, that could come back, play until these other guys have really kind of pushed him out. I think that would have been a smart move. I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen what Adam Frazier's done this year, so I don't know if if it would have been worth it. But yeah, I like that idea. I was really surprised that they brought Taylor in. One option I think that they do have for that is G1 Bay. Yeah, if you wanted to bring him up and put him in center, I think he's shown what he can do in AAA, and it's kind of like Sawinski. I don't know that him being in AAA is really doing him any favors. So I think we know what kind of AAA player he is, and we need to see more in the big leagues. So I think before we got on, we were talking about how Rowdy had till the end of May, or that was our guess. I think the same could be said for Taylor with the way Bay's been playing.
Yeah, and you did a great segue there for us as we are talking about the elephant in the room at this point in time, and that is Rowdy Tellez. I mean, Rowdy Tellez, as we're speaking, he he has, oh dear God, I hate to even read these out. Slash line 178, 252, 234, a 486 OPS with one home run. I mean, that is just, here's my thing is, you can live with the average. You can't live with that on-base percentage, and you absolutely cannot live with that slugging or that OPS. I mean, he is here for power. He was brought in for power. And the hits that he has had, even when he was getting going, were like opposite field singles or right up the middle. It wasn't even like he was making good contact that you thought there was something on the horizon.
Yeah, and it was funny. Like I listened to your last episode, and on mine last week, we kind of said the same thing. It's like over the past 7 games, Rowdy Tellez has been arguably the Pirates' hottest hitter because he was hitting like well over 300 in the last 7 games from when we recorded our episodes. He's over. So
Yeah.
like he showed a little bit of flash, but like you said, it wasn't power. It wasn't anything off the wall. It was just those opposite field singles. And for first base, and for especially a guy that really was only brought in because of the power, he doesn't have any. And, that's not doing anybody any good.
So, Charlie, if you are Ben Cherington, what are you doing with Rowdy Tellez?
I'm giving him to the end of May. I think I'm giving a little bit to kind of turn around, but I mean, you can't trade him. Nobody's going to want him. So I'm giving him another week or so and then, cutting him loose. Turn first base over to Connor Joe permanently, I guess, until there's a different option. I'd love for, Cherington to go out and scour the market. And we were kind of talking about this before, and I've said this on my podcast. It's like, look for somebody that's blocked. Look at an organization that has a all-star first baseman, and look for somebody that is in AAA or even AA, but playing really well, and make that deal. Do what you have to do to bring them in. The Pirates have such a deep group of pitchers throughout the system. You could easily package a couple lower level guys together to get like a Spencer Horwitz I mention all the time from Toronto. Bringing somebody like that in, maybe gives you a first baseman for the future. Maybe it doesn't work out, but it's got to be better than Rowdy Tellez.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody's asking for the quick fix and asking for Jake Lamb to be called up, and I've been in my head that whole time saying no. But my thing is I mean, why not? I mean, at this point in time, I looked at his last 2 years in the majors. He had 165 plate appearances over 2 years. Had a 675 OPS during that time. 5 home runs, a 92 weighted runs created plus. If you go back to the 3 years, the numbers, they look about the same. It's about an 89, WRC plus over 300 and some plate appearances. If you do let go of Rowdy, I think that you do have to, at least in the immediate, replace it with that left-handed bat. And like you said, but that doesn't fix the problem. That doesn't fix,
Yeah.
the issue for the long term. And as much as I love Connor Joe, I do like Connor Joe's ability to play a little bit of outfield, a little bit of first base. And he is our hottest hitter right now. Everyone knows he has been my favorite player on this team for the past 2 years. I think you give him this shot, but I don't know if eventually the league catches up with him again, or if, I don't know if he gets over. Usually it looks like with him, when he gets over like 300 plate appearances, the numbers actually start to decline a little bit, or 350, I think it was last year. So, I mean, that's where it's like, I do want to see him not sit, obviously, as much as he's been sitting. But I think he's a guy that also he benefits from, matchups and different stuff as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the biggest problem with this, the organization, is that there is no first base options. Like throughout the system, there's no other. We're talking about Jake Lamb. It's not an exciting option, but there's nothing else. Malcolm Nunez is a guy that could down the road, but like I'm not super excited about him either. There's just nothing there, and that I think needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's where you say it's like, I think that a couple shows ago, Chris basically said, "Oh, Jake Lamb still plays baseball." You know what I mean? So at that point in time, and it's just like, but I mean, if it keeps going down and down and down, I mean, the only other option is, that phantom IL stint, but I don't even know how much that would do. And that doesn't open up a 40-man spot for anybody that can really, play in that position either. So, I mean, we've I think everybody's kind of talked this to death, but I mean, it's basically, at some point in time, something has to be done here.
Yeah. And I don't want Brandon Belt. I saw his name circling around on social media, and no, we don't need Brandon Belt.
And here's the thing: is if Brandon Belt was that much in demand, then Dom Smith wouldn't have been signed from the minors. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
So
exactly,
so I mean, there's something that's going on there. It's the same thing to me as like, okay, we all wanted to sign Gary Sanchez. I was okay with signing Gary Sanchez. It comes up that there's something there, and then he actually has to take less money. And just my piece on, we're running way over here, but I really don't care. I love talking Pirates baseball. I could do this for 2 hours. Is everybody saying we should have signed Rhys Hoskins? Well, if you sign Rhys Hoskins, then it really doesn't make much sense to sign Andrew McCutchen, because Rhys Hoskins has played just as much time at DH as he has at first base. He's not really a full-time first baseman, at least for this year, as he builds back up from, a fairly significant injury. I mean, people were just like, well, he was off for the entire, well, it's a pretty significant injury. And I, kind of came up a little bit lame, last night as well. And that doesn't play into my thinking whatsoever, but it was just basically like you would get a part-time first baseman who basically it wouldn't be able to platoon with Connor Joe.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly. There was no like great answer in the off season, other than something crazy that they weren't going to do, like sign Cody Bellinger and move him to first base. And, that's not a thing for the Pirates, but there's no great answer. The only thing that I keep thinking about is, next year, Andy Rodriguez will be back. So that's at least something in the system, that could possibly play over there. But yeah, it's definitely a problem area.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, here's the thing: is he has played some first base. You don't know what the arm is going to look and feel like when he comes back. But I mean, you've listened to me and Charlie ramble on long enough here, guys. It's been a blast. Definitely going to have Charlie back on again. First time guest, will not be his only time on this program. For you guys that don't, please go follow him. Definitely on the Bucco Fever Pod side of things, at Bucco Fever Pod. I reached out to him because I hadn't heard his pod in a while. I really enjoy his insight. And for anybody that does a show by themselves, it's tough, and he chooses to do it that way a lot. So I give him, props for that. Also at C Franson IV, that's number 4, but the IV. Charlie, thanks for coming on, brother. Can't wait to do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.